This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
On the laning that we do on Chanukah. And if we look carefully at the laning, we'll notice something very interesting about the laning of Chanukah that you don't find anywhere else. And that is, let's say on the third day of Chanukah, how do we lane? We lane by Yom HaShlishi, we break it up into two. The Kohen lanes the first half, the Levi lanes the second half, and the Yisrael lanes by Yom HaRavi. On the fourth day, you break up Yom HaRavi into two, and then you lane the fifth day. That's what Ashkenazim do. And why in the world are we laning about the fifth day of Chanukah on the fourth day of Chanukah? Why should we lane about the sixth day of Chanukah on the fifth day of Chanukah? It's not. Well, it's not on the fourth day of Chanukah. It's the fourth day. It's not the fifth day. Why would we lane about the fifth day? Why would we lane about tomorrow, today? So you say, what's the problem? We always do that. That's what we do on Sukkot. On Sukkot, on Chol HaMoed, we lane by Yom HaShlishi, Yom HaRavi, Yom HaRavi, Yom HaChamishi. Yeah, but that's very good on Sukkot. There's Sveika D'Yoma.
There's no Sveika D'Yoma.
But on Chanukah, there's no Sveika D'Yoma. You know how I know there's no Sveika D'Yoma? Because there are only 8 days of Chanukah in Eretz Yisrael and in Chutz La'aretz. There's no community in Chutz La'aretz that celebrates 9 days of Chanukah. Why not? Says the Avodraham. Because on a Yom Tif that's Midrabanan, there is no idea of Sveika D'Yoma. There's no Sveika D'Yoma on a Yom Tif which is Midrabanan. So if there's no concept of Sveika D'Yoma, we know today's the fourth day of Chanukah, the fifth day of Chanukah, the sixth day of Chanukah. Why would we lane about a diff tomorrow today? So I found something very interesting in the Shal Sechubas Arugas Haboisem. The first thing I want to point out is the Mechaber, Maran Bet Yosef, says we're wrong. You're not allowed to lane about tomorrow, today. Minog of the Sfaradim is on the third day of Chanukah. They break up Yom HaShlishi into two. They repeat it again in the third Aliyah. The fourth day, they break up the fourth Aliyah into two, and they repeat it again. And that is the opinion of the Mechaber. If you look at number 4, the Shulchan Aruch writes, Siman Taf Reish Pei Daled, B'yom Sheni, on the second day of Chanukah, Korei Kohen, B'yom HaSheni, Ad Parechad Ben Bakar. On the second day of Chanukah, the Kohen lanes by Yom HaSheni, he breaks it up into two. V'Levi Ad by Yom HaShlishi, V'Yisrael Chayzer V'Korei by Yom HaSheni V'Aderech Zeh B'Chol Yom. See, Shulchan Aruch says very clearly that what we're doing is not correct. Shulchan Aruch writes that, how do you break up the 3 aliyos? You break up Yom HaSheni into 2, and then the Yisrael repeats it. Says Rama, Hagav Yeshayimrim, She Yisrael Korei B'Yom Shela Achrav. Some say that a Yisrael reads the next day, Dahainu B'Yom HaGimel, V'chein B'chol Yom, V'chein Noyagin. Says Rama, the minhag is, on the third day, you read the third and the fourth. The fourth, and the fifth. My hi, what's pshat in this? Doesn't make sense. So I saw something very interesting in the Shal Sechuvas Arugas Haboisem. The Arugas Haboisem was with Moshe Greenwald. Right? He was the Rav in Chust. And Rav Moshe Greenwald was born in 1853, passed away in 1911. Very interesting. He learned in the Yeshiva the Ksav Sofer, and he had a very good Chavrusa in Pressburg. Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. He learned the Chavrusa with Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. And after the Maram Shik passed away, he became the Rav in Chust. Says the Arugas Haboisem, why is Chanukah called Chanukah? So everybody knows the Rambam, Chanu b'Chafei. They rested on the 25th day of Kislev. That's what the Rambam says. However, says Arugas Haboisem, there are Rishonim that disagree with the Rambam about this. Many Rishonim say, not many, a Rishon says that they did not rest on the 25th. They rested on the 24th. So it should be called Chanukah. Doesn't sound as good. No, that's not why. Different reason. Why is it called Chanukah? Whatever. Like the Avudraham says, Chesneiros halacha kabeis Hillel, or Chanukas hamizbeach, but not Chanu b'chafei, because they didn't rest on the 25th day of Kislev. They rested on the 24th day of Kislev. The Rambam says they rested on the 25th. The Arugas Haboisem quotes the Ran that they rested on the 24th. Now, I looked in the Ran doesn't say this. But the Meiri says this. The Meiri says they rested on the 24th day of Kislev. Comes out, says Arugas Haboisem. The Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber, always goes with whose Shita? The Rambam. except, by the way, by the halach of Ner Chanukah. He always goes with the Rambam. The Rambam says they rested on the 25th day of Kislev. So that means the first day of Chanukah was the first day of the miracle of the Neros, and the first day of the miracle of the war. But according to the Meiri, the first day of Chanukah is the first day of the miracle of the Neros, and the second day of the miracle of the war. The second day of Chanukah is the second day of the miracle of the Neros, and the third day of the miracle of the war, because they didn't win the war on the 25th, according to the Meiri, they won the war on the 24th. So each day of Chanukah has two countings. In one way it's the first day, and in another way it's the second day. The second day in one way it's the second day, in another way it's the third day. Says the Arugas Haboisim, the Machloikis, the Mechaber, and the Ramah, is dependent on the Machloikis, the Rambam, and the Meiri. When did they win the war? Was it the 25th or the 24th? Let's see this inside in number 5. We won't get a chance to see everything, but let's look at number 5. V'ayin barachayim simatafresh peidalid b'seder kriyas haTorah b'Chanukah. Look in Shulchan Aruch. Dilahator v'Shulchan Aruch karei kayin b'yom hasheni v'hayisrael chayzer v'karei b'yom hasheni. Right? The Shita of the Mechaber is the Yisra, the Kayin reads Ayam Hasheni, the Levi reads Ayam Hasheni, and the Yisrael repeats. The Al Derech Zeh B'chol Yom. The Harama Kasav, the Rama writes, the Yisrael Karei B'yom Shala Achrav. The Yisrael reads the next day. The Hainu B'yom HaGimel, which is the third day. B'yishleim Edatali B'plukta De Haran V'Harambam. Says Arugas Haboisim, this is dependent on the Machlokes, the Ran and the Rambam. I believe this has to be a printing mistake. It's not the Ran. The Ran.
Where's the Meiri?
The Meiri says it's on Chaft.
It's the Ran.
Yeah, so he can't mean the Ran. I look. The Ran says exactly like the Rambam that they rested when on the 25th. So he means Meiri. It's dependent on the Machlokes, the Meiri and the Rambam. Ichanu b'chaf dalid, ichanu b'chaf hey, min b'chemes hayivanim. According to the opinion that they rested on the 24th, Im came Yom Sheni de Chanukah, Havale Yom Shlishi leNitzachon HaMelchama. The second day of Chanukah is the third day from when they won the war. So what do we do? Mutav Sheyikar Yisrael Yom Shlishi. It is appropriate that at least for the third Aliyah we lay in the third day. Why? But it's not the third day of Chanukah, it's the second day of Chanukah. At least so you'll have some remembrance, it's the third day from when the war was won. Sheyal Kapanim, Ktsas, Zichrain, Lanes, Nitzachon HaMelchama. Ma'she'ein Kain LaHarambam. But according to the Rambam, D'loichanu min Nitzachon HaMelchama ad Chafhei, that they didn't rest from the war until the 25th day of Kislev. Imkain l'chomili havale yom sheni. So then the second day of Chanukah is the second day for everything, for the miracle of the oil, for the winning of the war. Misham hachi Yisrael chayzer v'kar b'yom sheni. So you could go home today, could go to Mincha Marav tonight, could ask everyone in the shul, why on the 5th day of Chanukah or the 4th day of Chanukah, why are we reading about tomorrow? This is a Arugas Haboisim that is really not so well known, and it's really a minhag that if you think about, doesn't have a real good explanation without this Meiri.
This would be only good for the second day. What about the 5th and the 7th?
The 5th day
is not Yom Nitzachon.
Is the 5th day of Chanukah and the 6th day from the winning of the war. In other words, every day of Chanukah has in it two nisim that we're commemorating. The miracle of the oil, which is on that day, and the miracle of the Nitzachon HaMelchama, which really starts from the day before.
But what did they do before the Rambam?
What did they do before the Rambam? With what?
Before the Rambam. How did they lay before?
Before the Arugas Haboisim.
Before the Rambam made the ruling.
Before Arugas Haboisim.
Oh, everybody knew that. Arugas Haboisim.
They knew it by heart.
What? It's like, how did anyone make potato kugel without recipes, you know? The Arugas Haboisim is telling you what the explanation for the minhag is.
Had to come from somewhere. Where did it come from?
What, the Shita HaRambam?
That they rained the next day. Arugas Haboisim is giving a reason.
Yeah, so this is the reason. This is the reason.
So I want to know.
How long was the Meiri living?
The Meiri Shita was a well-known Shita. Meiri is one of the Rishonim. This was one of the...
Yeah, how Rishon is? 1300.
Before the Rambam.
Right after that.
Yeah. He's one of the early Rishonim. Okay. So there's one issue I wanted to discuss, a ha'ara on the Kriyas HaTorah of Chanukah. Okay, let's go on to the next sheet. Okay. something very interesting over here. The Gemara tells us, one of the most well-known Gemaras in Shas, the Gemara asks, "My Chanukah?" Right? What's Chanukah? Right? The Tanur.
The cafe, right?
Yeah.
Tanur Rabbanan. That's
Look, so Gemara says, "The Tanur Rabbanan b'Chafei b'Kislev Yoimei de Chanukah Tamanya Inon." There are 8 days of Chanukah. D'loi lamispad behind. You're not to eulogize. D'loi lasanois behind. You can't fast. Shekishenichnasu Yivanim laheichal. When the Yivanim entered the heichal, Timu kol hashmanim shebeheichal. They were matame all the oils. Ukshegavra malchus beis chashmanoi v'nitzcham. When the Chashmonaim prevailed, Badku v'loi matzah l'pach echad shel shemen. They found one jug of oil. Sheyimunach b'chaysamah shel kohen gadol. V'loi hayabai ela lahadak yom echad. It only had enough oil to last for 1 day. Nasa by nes v'edliku mimenu shmoina yamim. L'shana acheres. So the next year, Kavum, they established these days. Ba'asayim yamim tovim behalel v'hoida. What's halal? Kriyas halal. What's hoida? Says Rashi, Ala Nisan. The big problem with this Gemara. That is, Iker Chasam Min HaSefer. The main mitzvah of Chanukah has been completely left out of the Gemara. Right?
Victory.
Besides I'm not talking about the event even. Ask a kid, what do you do on Chanukah? He's going to tell you, say Ala Nisan. He's going to tell you, say Halal. You light the menorah. The Gemara should say, Kavam v'asam. Kava mitzvah shel hadlakas ner Chanukah. Gemara doesn't say one word. The left out, right? Halal, right? You ask a kid, what do you do on Chanukah? They don't even know about halal. They don't even know about Anisim. They know you light a menorah. Every kid knows you light a menorah. That's the most prominent mitzvah. Not one word is mentioned in the Gemara that the Chachamim established the mitzvah of hadlakas ner Chanukah.
Idliku b'hem only on that year, 8 yamim.
What?
It says, Idliku b'hem mimenu 8 yamim l'shana, it's on that year.
Idliku mimenu 8 yamim. It lit for 8 days. Right? Do you see anywhere the Gemara says the Chachamim made a mitzvah that you have to light the menorah? What happened? Why did the Gemara leave it out? So the most obvious, most prominent mitzvah is completely left out. I'll ask you another question. Right? Everybody knows the question. The Gemara doesn't say anything about the war. But I'm asking, the Gemara doesn't say anything about the mitzvah. It left it out. Another question. In Al Anisim, right? Finu sechalecha v'tiras mikdashela v'kavu shmayna simei Chanukah elu. Yeah, that's all they did. That's all they established Chanukah for. Lahaydes ulhala. What about v'kavu shmayna simei Chanukah elu? Lahadlik neiros ulahaydes ulhala. It's left out of Al Anisim also. Not one word is mentioned in Al Anisim that there's a mitzvah to light the menorah on Chanukah. What, they forgot about it? What?
The name not to show has a reference.
So did we light Chanukah?
To the Machama.
And at the end, some add.
It says v'hidliku neres b'chasos because they did. But why doesn't the Al Anisim say they were kaiveya? They established Chanukah as a day to light neros.
good question. Since they're telling us a dinner, they
What?
say that.
Al Anisim doesn't even mention that there was a nest that lasted 8 days.
Right. In the Al Anisim it doesn't say, right, the last 8 days. But here, it's telling you what's Chanukah. It says, v'kavu shmaynas mechanukah lahaydos ulahalel. What happened to the mitzvah of hadlakas ner Chanukah? Now let's look in the Rambam very carefully. Okay, we got to comb it with a fine tooth comb. Look at the Rambam. Look at number 2. Umipnei zeh. And because of this, Hiskinu, right, the Rambam's going on how the Chashmonaim came into the Beis HaMikdash and they purified it and they rededicated it. And because of all of this, the Chachamim of that generation enacted Sheyu Shmainas Hayamim Ha'elu Shetchilasan Milel Chamisha V'Esem L'Kislev, that begins on the 25th day of Kislev, Yemei Simcha V'Halal. Okay, they were masakein that it should be days of happiness and halal. Umadlikin bahen haneros. You know what the word umadlikin means? And they lit neros. Rambam doesn't say they were masakein that you should light neros. He doesn't say ulahadlik neros.
But who was the Rabbanan who decided it?
What?
It says at the end, he says,
okay, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. Good. But right now, it's very interesting. The Rambam doesn't say that they were masakein, right? It says, Hiskinu chachamim. The Rambam doesn't say, lahadlik bahaneros, that you should light neros. But Erev al Pischei Abatim, he says, umadlikin. People do it. B'chol layla v'layla, every night, mishmainas halelos, laharus u'legalis hanes. V'yamim elu heine hanekram Chanukah. These days are called Chanukah, v'heina asurin, behesped, v'tainis. You're not to eulogize or fast, kimei apurim. Says the Rambam, oh, what about the long lost mitzvah of lighting the Nerois? V'had lokas ha-Nerois behen? Mitzvah midivrei soifrim kekriyas ha-Megillah. Lighting the Nerois is a mitzvah midivrei soifrim, is a mitzvah midrabanan, just like reading the Megillah. Why is the Rambam cutting up the halacha of madlikin b'neros into two? In the beginning, he just says umadlikin, as if people do it the same way, right? It's like people play dreidel. Umadlikin, they do it. And then at the end, the Rambam says, by the way, the mitzvah of lighting the Nerois, hadlakas Neros is a mitzvah midivrei soifrim, like reading the Megillah. Why doesn't the Rambam say kriyas Hallel is a mitzvah midivrei soifrim, like lighting the Megillah? Or
maybe it wasn't easy to do at the beginning, and then at one time they did. So that's why I'm curious to know who first was to do it.
People took it upon themselves, and then the Sofrim made it a mitzvah.
So you're saying that the Chachamim didn't make the mitzvah of
Maybe couldn't it work the other way?
That the people did it? Okay, so now we're talking. So let's see. We're gonna look in a very interesting Maramakom.
A lot of things that we do that people took upon.
Look, we all know that Ner Chanukah is one of the Sheva mitzvahs D'Rabbanan. It's one of the mitzvahs D'Rabbanan. The Rambam even says it's like Kriyas HaMegillah. Now, Kriyas HaMegillah, who enacted Kriyas HaMegillah? Right? It's Midivrei Soifrim. It's Midivrei Nevi'im. So the Rambam seems to be saying that lighting the menorah is a very early takana d'Rabbanan, and yet at the beginning he just says umadlikin mahaneros. So we're going to see a very interesting Maramakom number 3.
What does it mean by Sofrim? Isn't Sofrim before Chanukah? The period of Sofrim was before Chanukah.
Sofrim is midim. No, when you say Sofrim, it doesn't specifically mean
Chazal.
Yeah, the early Chachamim. Anshe Knesset Hagdolah. Anshe Knesset Hagdolah.
Why do you say the Nevi'im? The age of Nevi'im was over.
No, not in times of Purim.
Before the
No.
The last Nevi'im went on to Kriyas
no,
Gedolah.
I'm sorry. Was before Vaishim.
Okay, so let's see. Rabbi say we have a very interesting Maramakom from Rabbi Yeshua Mikutna. Who's Rabbi Yeshua Mikutna? Rabbi Yeshua Mikutna was born in 1831 in Plotsk, in Poland. He's one of the Gedolei Olam, one of the Gaonei Yisrael. And the Chidushei Harim said about him, people say we live in a Dar Yasayim, right? A Dar Yasayim, you don't have Gedolim. The Chidushei Harim said, if you have Rabbi Yeshua Mikutna, it's not a Dar Yasayim. It's a big Gaon. And he addresses these questions. He asked these questions.
When was he born, you said?
1831. He passed away in 1893. Look at number 3. My grandfather's grandfather published one of his Sfarim, Yeshuas Malka and the Rambam. Okay, look at number 3. Umadin estapek mar.
Your grandfather's grandfather?
My father's father's mother's father knew Rabbi Yeshua Mikutna.
Oh, yeah? So your great-grandfather?
My great-great-grandfather.
Great-great-grandfather.
Okay, he knew him.
And he published something about it? He published his book?
He was one of the printers. He published it, yeah. Of the Yeshuas Malka. Anyway, Umadin estapek mar. So this is in one of the Sfarim that Yeshua Mikutna wrote, Yavin Das. He writes like this. Umadin estapek mar. That which you have a question. Igam bebeis hamikdash. Asu eza zeichel anes b'neros Chanukah b'toisos neros v'ar. Yeshua Mikutna wants to know. Bizman shebeis hamikdash hayakayim. When the temple was standing, did they light ner Chanukah? Look what he says. Bezeh yesh li laharach. I have a lot to say about this. Hine b'takanas mitzvos ner Chanukah. Regarding the takana of the mitzvah ner Chanukah, yesh mevucha gedola. There's a great confusion. Tzricha bir dvarim. We need to clarify. B'shas nimsa. If you look in Shas, you'll find rak kavam b'halal v'hada. They established Chanukah to say Hallel and to say Alanisim. Ve'ikar mitzvahs ner Chanukah chaser min hasefer. There's no mention that they enacted a mitzvah of ner Chanukah. Uchvar amdu b'zeh. The Mefarshim have tried to understand this. Gam divrei harambam zalhima temuim. The words of the Rambam are a question. The Kasav, the Rambam writes, Because of this, the Chachamim in that generation enacted, Sheyiu Shmoyne Yamim Halalu Yimei Simcha v'Halal B'Shavak Ner Chanukah. The Rambam left out Ner Chanukah. Ra'kasav u'madlik neros. The people like neros. Midolai kasav u'lahadlik neros. The fact that the Rambam didn't write, you should light neros. Rak u'madlik neros. Mashma tehadlaka hazu haisa rishus v'loi chayva. Says Rabbi Shlomi Kuna, it is mashma from the Rambam that originally lighting Ner Chanukah was optional. Right? You want to spin a dreidel? Spin a dreidel. You want to light the menorah? Light a menorah. V'achar kach, and then at the end, Messiahim, the Rambam concludes, v'hadlakas haneros mitzvah midivei sefer. The Rambam concludes that lighting the menorah is a mitzvah midrabanan. V'lama leichashav teikaf le'el. Why didn't the Rambam say this right away? Shekasav mashyaskinu chacham shabayis adam mitzazu. Why didn't the Rambam say that lighting the menorah is a mitzvah midivei sefer as soon as he talks about umadlikim haneros? Haloi davarhu. There's got to be something about this. There's got to be something to this. So, and we added, what about an Al Hanisim? In Al Hanisim also, there is no mention. They just said, tell you a very interesting thing. Look in the Mishnah Berurah.
Halal is also whiskey. The same breath. The same sentence in the Rambam.
Yeah, but the Rambam says, Hiskinu.
What is Hiskinu?
They enacted that it should be Yemei Simcha v'Halal. But then he, instead of saying lehadlik neros, and that would be going back on Hiskinu.
So halal was also a rishus.
No, because in the beginning he says Hiskinu. What were they Hiskin? Simcha v'Halal. Kama. No, but if Hiskinu was going back on Umadlikin, if Hiskinu was going back on Umadlikin, it would have said lahadlik. In other words, they were masakin A and lahadlik. Umadlikin means and they light.
And what does wahala? What's the word there?
Here, the way you read it, Hiskinu what? That it should be 8 days. Yimei simcha v'halal. What are you reading?
Simcha v'halal umadlikin.
No, if umadlikin was a continuation of Hiskinu, it would put in a lamed. Ulehadlik, meaning they were masakin to do what? This and to do this. Umadlikin is just.
Why you're taking.
Even if you don't like that diuk, you have to acknowledge the fact that the Rambam at the very end says as a separate clause that v'hadlakas haneros v'hen mitzvah midivei seifrim kukriyas hamegillah. He doesn't say that halal is a mitzvah midivei seifrim like laying the Megillah. He doesn't say that al hanisim is a midivei seifrim like the Megillah. The Rambam seems to break up hadlakas neros into two. At first he just says umadlikim v'haneros, and then at the end he says v'hadlakas neros mitzvah midivei seifrim.
It's not the first, that's a mitzvah.
Yeah. Okay. Another very interesting thing. Look in the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah says, Kosfu hasfarim. The Sfarim tell us, Shetoiv kol echad, that it's good for every person, Sheyachriach lasois loy menorah yafel lefikach. Try to have a nice menorah.
Okay, that's not in the introduction.
V'chein haneros yasa yafel. Have nice neros. I have one question for
That's
you.
Hidu.
Why in the world should you have a nice menorah? Why should you have a nice menorah?
Hidu.
Hidu what?
Ze keli v'anvel.
Should you have a nice talus bag?
Yes, why not?
Yeah, exactly. Why not? But there's no zekeli v'anveyu
Why they put it
on
on
a
the
talus
kali,
bag.
this silver taste, so for this is a keli v'anvel. It's a tara. To make it nice.
That's because.
You don't even need a menorah.
Right. So
Let me ask you a question. If you put 8 candles down with no menorah, are you yotzei the mitzvah?
Yes.
Yes. Now I'm going to point out that even though most poskim say yes, the Chesed Avram, who is the grandfather of the Chidah, writes a number of things. He counts a list of 15 types of materials your menorah could be made out of. And finally, he ends off by saying that the shells of onions cannot be used for a menorah. Why? Because it's not a kli. And then he says, what if you have a beautiful gold menorah? Onion peels, yeah. Yeah, onion peels. Yeah.
Put oil in there.
Yeah. Then the Chesed Avram writes, what if you have a beautiful menorah that costs $100,000? The only thing is, it can't stand on its own. It needs to lean against the wall. Says the Chesed Avram, you're not yet to the mitzvah menorah. Why? Because a kli that cannot stand on its own is not a kli, and you're not yotzei the mitzvah. So what do you see from the Chesed Avram? that you need a kli. And the Avnei Nezer, by the way, in Siman Taf Kuf, paskins like the Chesed Avram, that you need a kli for the menorah. Nevertheless, this is not the consensus of the poskim. Consensus of the poskim is you take one candle, two, you stick it down, you go to say the mitzvah. So let me ask you a question. According to those poskim, why in the world should you have a nice menorah? You don't even need a menorah. The concept of Zeh Keli V'Yanveu is, whatever the cheftza of the mitzvah is, you should make nice. Have a nice Sefer Torah, have a nice mezuzah, have a nice strings, have a nice talis. You ever see anywhere in Shas have a nice talis bag? Oh, I have a great idea. Everyone should have a nice doorpost.
Have a nice candle.
Have a nice doorpost. Why? Because you put the mezuzah on the doorpost. Come on. The doorpost is only the heichi timtza to be mechayev you in the mitzvah. Right? Oh, you should make a nice roof. Why? So that when you put up the makkah, it will be a beautiful mitzvah. I mean, come on. This is the heichi, the situation, the circumstance that allows you to perform the mitzvah is not part of the mitzvah, and there's no inyan of hiddur on that. So why should you have a nice menorah? I mean, it's a nice thing.
The more beautiful you make the event, the more hana everybody draws from it. My wife, she loves the menorah when it's lit nicely and sits by itself. If you have onion peels, then it's smelly, it's messy.
Correct.
So the more perfect you have the event to go through, the more hana you draw from it.
Does it say in any sefer you should have a nice table to put the menorah on? No. Does it enhance your performance of the mitzvah? Yeah. Does it make it nicer? Yeah. But halachically, is there any inyan? I'm not saying that whatever we do to do a mitzvah in a more beautiful way is a very nice thing. But this is the Mishnah Berurah talking. The Mishnah Berurah is not trying to give you, instead of wearing your regular shirt, if you put on a Shabbos shirt to light the menorah, is that nice? It's beautiful. The Mishnah Berurah is going to tell you, you should shine your shoes before you light the menorah. Why is there what's the inyan of having a nice menorah? It's not a cheftza of the mitzvah. It's not part of the mitzvah. You're right, it beautifies it, but maybe, we'll see, perhaps, maybe we could add something to what the mitzvah. According to the Chesed Avram, or according to the Avnei Nezer, I understand, it's ma'akev.
Yes.
But the Mishnah Berurah doesn't paskin like the Chesed Avram. The Mishnah Berurah doesn't write you have to have a menorah. Okay.
Isn't that the same at the Edgel? Rabbi Orban right now is speaking about it.
Yeah.
To have a nice...
You should have a beautiful esrog. Does anywhere the Mishnah Berurah say you should have a nice esrog box? People have it. It's a nice thing. Very nice. But you will not find in any sefer. You should have a nice esrog box. Not an inyan. Not an inyan to have a nice esrog box. Maybe, if your mother-in-law doesn't get you one, there might be problems. But besides that, besides your father, but besides that, there's no halachic inyan of a nice esrog box, right? Fine. The Ramban, very famous Ramban. Ramban says like this. The Ramban wants to know, we're going to lay this on Zois Chanukah, on the last day of Chanukah, that by the Chanukah's HaMizbeach, we lay on the first day, the second day, the third day, the fourth day, the fifth day. All the Shvatim brought karbanos by the inauguration of the Mizbeach, with the exception of Aaron HaKohen, the Kohanim, did not have a carbon to bring when it came to the Chanukah's HaMizbeach. Aaron HaKohen felt bad. Chol Shadaita. So Rashi points out, why is Parshas Behaloischa right after Parshas Nasai? Because Aaron felt bad that he had no carbon to bring in inaugurating the Mizbeach. Hashem said, don't worry, you have the Menorah. So you have nothing to worry about. They have the Karbanos, you have the Hadlakas HaMenorah. That's the connection between the end of Nasai and the beginning of Behaloischa. The end of Nasai talks about the Chanukah's HaMizbeach. Aaron HaKohen did not have a share in the Chanukah's HaMizbeach. Hashem said, don't worry, don't sweat it. You're going to light the menorah. So Ramban wants to know, look in number 5 in the second paragraph. I can't understand. Why did God console Aaron with the Hadlakas Haneros? There are many things that Aaron did that other Shvatim didn't do. Why didn't Hashem console Aaron that he has the Ketores? Yeah, does anyone mind if we go a little over?
No. Well, Hanukkah. Wow.
Okay. Uve minchas chavitin. Aaron HaKohen brought the minchas chavitin every day. Uve avodas Yom Kippurim. She'ena ksher alabai. Aaron HaKohen. Why didn't Hashem say, Aaron, you have nothing to worry about? You're the only one who could do the avodah on Yom Kippur. Why didn't Hashem say, Aaron, you have nothing to worry about? You're the only one who goes into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So why did Hashem had to pick Dafka, the Hadlakas HaNeros? There are many things. Says the Ramban. Look in the skip a paragraph. Vira'isi. So the Ramban quotes a medrash basically that says that when Hashem consoled Aaron, He wasn't just consoling him with the lighting of the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash, He was consoling him with the lighting of the menorah on Chanukah. Let's see what the Ramban says. V'ra'isi oid bilamdeinu, we find in the medrash, in Tanchuma, v'chein b'medrash Rabbah, Amar loy HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'Moshe, Hashem says to Moshe, Leich emar la'Aaron, go tell Aaron, Al tisyare, don't be afraid, Le'gedula mizos ata muchan, you are prepared for this gedula. Why? HaKarbanos calls man shbeis hamikdash kayim hein noyagin. Because karbanos are temporary. The chavitin is only bizman shbeis hamikdash kayim. Aval haneros la'olam el mol pnei hamenorah iro. The avodah of the menorah lasts forever. So the Ramban, look in the next paragraph. What do you mean the avodah of the menorah lasts forever? It's not true. Yeah, do we light the menorah nowadays?
No.
We don't have it. Says the Ramban in the next paragraph, it's known, Shek she'ein beis hamikdash kayim. V'hakarbanos betelen, and the karbanos are bato, mibnei chorbanai, af haneros betelis. The lighting of the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash is also bato. The same way we can't bring a carbon chatas, asham, shlamim, oila, we can't go into the Beis Hamikdash and light the menorah. Says the Ramban, Hashem, yeah, you want to light the menorah, you got to go to Italy, right? Avaloi ramzu, ela leneros chanukas chashmonai. Says the Ramban, you know what Hashem was telling Aaron? You're going to have an avodah that does last forever. What's the avodah that lasts forever? Shehi noheges af la'achar chorban b'galusenu. The avodah of lighting the menorah is the only avodah of the Beis Hamikdash that lasts forever.
No, but we have now also unshama parim sfatenu.
We have an Neshama Sfarim. The words are as if, but the words are as if we're bringing it. But the lighting of the menorah is a hemshech, mamash, of lighting the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. That's what the Ramban is. What's the Ramban saying? Aaron felt bad that he didn't have a share in the karbanos. So Hashem said, karbanos, the karbanos are temporary. I'm going to give you an avodah that this avodah will last forever. So what's the Ramban saying? The Ramban is saying that when we light the menorah in our homes, it's not a new mitzvah. You know, you lay in the Megillah, the Chachamim invented a new mitzvah. Netilas Yadayim, the Chachamim invented a new mitzvah. Lighting the menorah, the Chachamim didn't invent a new mitzvah. They said, the avodah, the oiraisa of lighting the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash, we will allow that to continue 8 days a year on Chanukah. In other words, when we light the menorah, it's not a new mitzvah the Rabbanan enacted, it's a continuation of the lighting of the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. That's what the Ramban is saying. The Ramban is saying, Hashem told Aaron, all the other avodos will end, lighting the menorah will continue. That's a very big chiddush. That's how we're lighting from.
But it's not the same menorah.
It's not the same menorah.
Sheva kanim, this is 8 kanim. Some difference.
Okay. But in some way, the way they were masaking the mitzvah, it wasn't they made a new mitzvah. They made it that we're going to allow that mitzvah, that avodah, to continue. Look at number 6. Says Rabbi Shlomo Lakutna, L'chei nira la'aniyas daiti. The kivan de mavor b'drashas Chazal. Since we find in Chazal, huva b'Ramban, we find in the Ramban b'haloischa the mitzvahs ner Chanukah hi hemshach lahadlakas hamenorah b'beis hamikdash. Lighting the menorah, it's not a new mitzvah d'Rabbanan. It's merely a continuation of lighting the menorah in the beis hamikdash. Dal yedei mitzvah shel ner Chanukah yeshla lemitzvahs hadlakas hamenorah kiyam la'ad. By the Rabbanan being masakin ner Chanukah, the avodah of the beis hamikdash lasts forever. Says Reb Shimon Lakuna, so it's very logical to say, why should they make a mitzvah of lighting Ner Chanukah bizman shebeis hamikdash hayakayam? If the whole purpose of Hadlakas Ner Chanukah is what? To continue, to be mamshich, the avodah of lighting the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash, so when the Beis HaMikdash was standing, there's no reason to make a mitzvah of Hadlakas Ner Chanukah. It is not far-fetched to say, when the Beis Hamikdash was standing, there's a Yom Tif of Hallel, there's a Yom Tif of Haidah, there's no Yom Tif of Hadlakas Ner Chanukah. What do you need to make a Zeicher to the Menorah when you have a Menorah? V'rak mishachar beis hamikdash chashishu Chazal. Chazal were afraid when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. We may forget about it. Sham yishtaka chanes kiven shekava ner Menorah lachein heskinu Chazal mitzvos ner Chanukah lahalik b'pischei abatim. Says Rabbi Shmuel Lakuna an amazing thing. Look at the Gemara. The Gemara is talking about at the time of Chanukah. Kavam v'asam yamim tovim v'halel v'hayda. What happened to Ner Chanukah? Nothing happened to it. They never made a mitzvah of Ner Chanukah in the generation after the miracle of Chanukah happened. They made halal. Halal was a chiyuv. Al Anisim was a chiyuv. But the Rabban, the Chachamim who made Al Anisim did not make a mitzvah of Ner Chanukah. If you look in the Al Anisim, why is there no mention of the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah? Because they were not Masakein Ner Chanukah. They were Masakein Al Anisim, they were Masakein Halal, they were not Masakein to light the Menorah.
Why?
Because since Rabbi Simon the Ramban,
They had a Menorah. In time of the finishing the Gemara?
No, the Gemara is reporting what happened in the time of Chanukah, right? My Chanukah, the Lafikach, the Gemara says, Lashana Acheres, the next year, Kavim v'asam yamim tovim v'havada. The year after the miracle of Chanukah, what do? Only halav v'hayda.
So if this is the case, so why the Rambam didn't say Lavlik?
So what's pshat in the Rambam?
But what was the minute? What were they remembering a year later?
The miracle.
The neighbors, not the war. The war they celebrate.
So how do they remember it? By saying Hallel. But there's no reason to light. Again, Rabbi Shlomo Kuna is saying that even though we have no minchas chavitin anymore, we have no carbon oil, we have no carbon chatas, the lighting of the menorah is not a new mitzvah d'Rabbanan. It's a continuation of the lighting of the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. So while the Beis Hamikdash, if the menorah is burning in the Beis Hamikdash, there's nothing to be mamshech.
So that's the reason the Rambam said umadlikin.
So what does the Rambam mean?
Is Hemshech.
Halal Haida. That's it. Correct. Says the Rambam says like this. This is how he's reading the Rambam. He says, "What were the Chachamim masakin?" Let's start reading again. Hiskinu Chachamim shaboisei hadar. Sheyu shmanas yamim aleiru shetchilasim elachamish v'asem mechizav yemei simcha v'halal. What did they enact? Halal v'hayda. Umadlikin maneros. And people, they lit menorahs. The same way we spin the dreidel, they lit the menorah. They weren't obligated to light the menorah because there was no takana of lighting the menorah. Later on, after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, after Al Anisim had been said for 200 years, after Halal had been said for 200 years, they were masakein to be mamshich, to continue the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. So what does the Rambam end? You may think, that's beautiful, you may think lighting the menorah is a lesser drabanan than Megillah, because Megillah was enacted by the early Chachamim. Hallel was enacted by the early Chachamim. But Ner Menorah was enacted after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. Says the Rambam, it's no less, though, than Kriyas HaMegillah. V'hadlakas haneros b'hen mitzvah midivrei soifrim k'Kriyas HaMegillah. But it's a later enactment. By the way,
it's on equal with Kriyas Megillah.
It's still on equal with the Kriyas Megillah.
It was enacted by the later Tanoim?
It was later, but it's still enacted by Anshe Knesset Hagdalah who were around when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed.
That was the period of the later Tanoim.
No, the early Tanam. The early Tanam.
We're 200 years already before the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed.
Hillel was 100 years before the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, right? Okay.
The middle of the time.
Let's just take this idea. Correct. But I don't think he was after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed.
That's 200 years after the.
Yeah.
Did they read the Megillah and Zman Shabbat Hamikdash Harikayim? Was that a mitzvah?
Yeah. Sure, it's the day by
the whole Sheni.
But why didn't they light the menorah? We're seeing a beautiful idea. When you light your menorah in your home, you're not just doing a new mitzvah d'Rabbanan. For 8 days a year, you have the license to do the avodah of the Beis Hamikdash. It's a continuation of the avodah of the Beis Hamikdash.
So why isn't the menorah necessary?
So 1 second. Look at the Ran. The Ran says something very interesting. We know, are you allowed to, you want to read a book, take it to the menorah and use the light of the menorah to read a book. Why not? Says the Rambam, says Rashi, because we want it to be, why do we light the menorah per Sumei Nisa? If you're going to be reading your book by the light of the menorah, people are not going to know you lit it for the mitzvah. People are going to think you lit it to read your book. Says the Ran, a different reason. Hilchos Chanukah, look at number 7. Why is it also l'shtamish la'ira? Perish kol tashmishin, va'afilu tashmish mitzvah. Dekivan sha'al yedei nes shenasa b'menorah. Since the miracle happened with the miracle in the menorah, tiknuha. That's why they enacted it. Asua k'menorah. They made the lighting of the menorah in our homes me'ain, a dimyon, to the lighting in the Beis Hamikdash. In the Beis Hamikdash, could you take your book in and read it? You're moyel behektish. So too, if you, to read a book to the Ner Chanukah, you're moyel behektish. What do you mean moyel behektish? What does my menorah got to do with the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash? The answer is very simple. The lighting of the menorah in our homes is a hamshacha. It's a continuation of the lighting in the Beis Hamikdash. We find another very interesting thing. The Rambam writes that a mitzvah that you're mechuyev to do, you say leh. So the Ravid wants to know, so why do we say al mikra megillah? So Ravid says, maybe you'll tell me, for drabanans are also like a rishus, they're not so obligatory, so you say al mikra megillah. So the Ravid says, so then why do we say lehadlik ner Chanukah? That's also a drabanan, we should say al. Meaning, why do we say al mikra megillah and lehadlik?
We learned in the previous Shiur before you that le means that it continues. When al is just you have to say the bracha before it starts.
So le is a hamshacha.
Also,
right? Says the Ravid. You want to know why we make lehadlik ner Chanukah? Because Chanukah is really like a mitzvah d'oraisa. What do you mean? But it's only mitzvah d'rabanan. Since the bracha on the menorah, it wasn't enacted on our mitzvah d'rabanan. You know what it was enacted for? The lighting of the Kohen Gadol in the Beis Hamikdash. What bracha did the Kohen Gadol make in the Beis Hamikdash? Lehadlik. And our lighting of the menorah, says the Ravid, is a continuation of the lighting of the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash, says the Ravid in number 8. Inami, 3 lines to the bottom. Mipnei shezu ha-bracha, hukva'a ala neiro shebamikdash. Since this bracha was enacted for the neiros in the Beis Hamikdash, shehein shel Torah, lefikach asua k'shel Torah, therefore they made the bracha have a nusach of a d'oraisa dika nusach, not a d'rabanan dika nusach. Why? Because even though our mitzvah of lighting the menorah is a mitzvah d'rabanan, but it's a continuation of the avodah, which was a d'oraisa. It's a credible thought. When we're lighting, that means the only avodah that remains today, that we still have, right? The Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. You can't do the Chumas Hadeshen. You can't bring the carbon tamid. You can't bring the Ketairas. You can't do anything. We have one avodah. The one avodah that continues till today is the avodah of lighting the menorah. So we'll end off by giving a little bit of a hezbollah.
So why the Kohanim wouldn't light the menorah only?
Why only
the Kohanim? Yeah.
The Kohen Gadol made a bracha.
Yeah, that's what the Ravid is saying. The Kohen Gadol made a bracha when he lit the menorah.
Ultimately, don't we need a menorah?
So perhaps the reason why you should have a nice menorah, like the Mishnah Berurah says, has nothing to do with Hiddur Mitzvah. Because the concept of Hiddur Mitzvah is only on the chayfetz of the mitzvah.
Right.
Perhaps we could say, I think I once heard this from Rabbi Weinfeld, I'm not sure, that since, like the Ran says, they were mesakein a mitzvah of halakas ner Chanukah. How? That it should be a continuation of the lighting in the Beis Hamikdash, and that's why you're now to be mishtamish la'ira, because it's like neila behektish. The inyan of a beautiful menorah is not because of Hiddur Mitzvah. You need to do something that is similar to the way that it was done in the Beis Hamikdash. Now you can't mamish have a menorah of seven because that's an Issur d'oraisa. But l'chol ha'pachos, to have a beautiful menorah, that's more of a dimyon. It's not a din in Hiddur Mitzvah, because you don't even need it to do the mitzvah. But it's more of a dimyon to the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. Now let's just end off. Why? Let's just think about, why of all the avodas in the Beis Hamikdash, is this the only avodah that lasts till today? There's a very interesting medrash. The medrash tells us that Rav Tarfon was once giving shiur, and a Talmud said a good svara, and you know what Rav Tarfon said? Kaftar v'ferach. You ever hear that expression? You want to hear a beautiful song, Kaftar v'ferach?
It's a book after all.
What's Kaftar v'ferach? The menorah had kaftairim with brachim. The Netziv writes that these kaftarim were what did the menorah represent at the Beis Hamikdash? Torah Shebal Peh. The menorah it represents the Ar HaTorah. The menorah represents the Torah the Arayin in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Luchais, that's Torah Shebachsav. The menorah represents Torah Shebal Peh, and the kaftairim and the brachim is the pilpul of the Torah. Rabbi say the Beis Hamikdash has been destroyed. We say in the Slichos, right? We say on Vahab, we say Hayir HaKodesh v'Hamachayzos Hayir Lecherpa Levizos v'Chol Machmadeha Tevuos Ugenuzos V'Yein Shiur The only thing that we have today, the only thing that we have from the Beis Hamikdash is a Torah. But which Torah? Torah Shebechsav has been co-opted by the Goyim. The Maral writes, the Gemara tells us in Gittin, why did Hashem make a bris with Klal Yisrael only with Torah Shebal Peh? Because Torah Shebechsav, it's written down. So if you write something down, I give it to you, someone could take it. So that's what the Goyim did. They took our Torah Shebechsav. It was written down. The Goyim claim it's theirs. But the Torah Shebal Peh, the Goyim were never able to claim. Why? Because what are they going to take? There's nothing to take. There's nothing written down. The Maral says that the klaf of Torah Shebechsav is what? Is the klaf. Is the klaf of the Sefer Torah. What's the klaf of Torah Shebal Peh? Us. Kasveim aluach libecha. In other words, Hashem can't make a bris with us with the Torah Shebechsav. Because let's say I give you a Sefer Torah. That's not a bris. Someone could take the Sefer Torah away. But when you learn Torah Shebal Peh, it can't be taken away. You know why? Because it's not written down. It's written down on the heart and mind of a Jew. That's why God only made a covenant. Ein Hashem kares brisim Yisrael ela b'Torah Shebal Peh. The only thing we have left from the Beis Hamikdash is Hadlakas Ner Chanukah. Why? Because the only thing we have left is the Torah Shebal Peh. That's the one thing that throughout all the generations still remains. That's why Rav Lezer tells or says, during the 9 days, if you make a siyum, right, you're allowed to eat meat. What do you mean you're allowed? So don't make a siyum and don't eat meat. If there's an Inyan of Avelos during the 9 days, right, because the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, so what are we doing? We're playing a trick, we're playing a game. Oh, you finish a Masechta, so you could make a siyum so you could eat meat. No, he's saying it's not a trick. If you make a siyum, this part of the Beis Hamikdash has not been destroyed. In other words, if you're able to learn a Masechta and make a siyum on it, this is one small shirayim of the Beis Hamikdash that remains. So it's not a trick. There's no Avelos now. Because we still have at least something from the Beis Hamikdash. In other words, the one thing that we have left over is Ein Shiur Rak HaTorah Azos, which is represented by the one avodah that we still have, the Hadlakas Ner Chanukah. And that's why the Chiddush of Rabbi Shiur Mikutna is, Bizman Beis Hamikdash Kayam, there is no need to light Ner Chanukah, because you had the Menorah in the Beis Hamikdash.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.